Okay, welcome to class, everybody. I'll be up there in just a second. There we go. We're going to continue to work through the 10 commandments. We finished commandments 1, 2, and 3 last time. And we will talk about commandments 4 through 10, see what we get to today. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns before we get further? And if you're make sure you're getting, if you're not here, make sure you're getting I'm sending out the links to everybody every week. So if you're not getting them, let me know and I'll make sure you get them. But you can find they're on a public YouTube playlist on our YouTube channel, which I think is St. John's CLM Ministries. I don't know why it's CLM. Does it stand for Columbus? Maybe? I don't know. I didn't create it. So that's where you can find them all, if you so choose. Okay, any questions? Before we move on to the 4th commandment, that's horribly out of focus. Actually, not too bad. Okay, so with the 4th commandment, we're moving on to a little bit of a different area. So if you remember from last time, we talked about how there are 2 tablets and they divide the commandments by theme. That's how we understand it as a teaching tool. The first tablet is our relationship with God. The second tablet, which is commandments 4 through 10, deal with our relationship with other beings, other humans. This goes off of Jesus's own teaching and understanding that there are 2 great commandments: that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and you love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the 2 great commandments. So those are the 2 divisions of it. So we're done now with our relationship with God, those commandments. You shall have no other gods, don't misuse God's name. Remember the Sabbath day. Now we're going to go on to the 4th commandment, which is honor your father and your mother. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them. So this is a fairly self-explanatory commandment, right? It just deals with our relationship with our moms and dads and how that shifts from time to time. The way in which we related to them when we were 10 is different than the way that we relate to them now if they're still alive, right? It kind of is focused, but the idea is, what does that honor look like? What does honor mean? Respect. Yeah, so we respect them. Why do we respect them? Are they? I mean, they're older. They gotta be. Like, logistically, they gotta be older. But is it because they're necessarily wiser? Not necessarily. So just because they're our parents. So by the mere fact that they hold that specific office, we have a specific responsibility to them. It's not because they're smart. It's not because they always do, the right thing, or because they're holy, or because they're always doing things that are worth looking up to. But instead, we do it simply because they are our moms and dads. They are our parents. They are the people who raised us. So simply because of that, whether they did a good job or a poor job of raising us, we still give them that respect and honor. Now, this doesn't mean that always necessarily got to have the closest relationship with them, but what you do is you do try and give them that special honor. Obviously, this in different circumstances, this is not just biological moms and dads. This is the people who raised you, is who it's talking about, that sort of thing. So we also got this as well, that we have not just moms and dads. So, but before we go any further, how is it you suppose that we honor them, we respect them? How do we do that? What are some concrete ways? Right, so we show them love. So we check on them, right? Right, especially at this age, right? Are your parents still alive? Yeah, so kind of like I'm getting to that point now. Now that this was actually part of the reason why we moved back. My parents are getting to that age where it's getting harder for them to get around. It's just not as easy for them, and so it was like, well, they're going to need help, and not too many more years. So we wanted to be close by so that we could do that. So to kind of that sort of thing, help them out. Doctor's visits, drive them around, that sort of thing. How else? Any takers? Nothing.
I'm not that far out of living out of my parents' house, but
well, now, I mean, yeah, this is a different thing as well. So listening to them, as far as it's reasonable, right? I mean, mother's got a mother always. I'm in my 40s, and my mom called me and called my wife to make sure that we had appropriate clothes to wear to track day, track and field day for St. John's. I'm like, Mom, I think we got it covered. Thank you though, because it's a place to love. So, if someone else would do that to me, I'd be maybe a little bit offended. Like, who do you think I am? But my mom does it. I know where it's coming from, and I know why she's doing what she's doing. So. Yeah. So I think those sort of things. So we, keep lines of communication open to show them respect. Praying for them is a big one as well. So we talk about there's 3 different types of parents. So we've already talked about the first one. There's I guess we'd call them family parents. Is that on there? Yeah, family parents. The second one is government parents. Okay. So this is where we're starting to get to the other authorities, right? So the 4th commandment does touch base with the political sphere, the political realm. We believe that government was instituted by God. Paul says this very clearly in Romans 13, and that's actually in our catechism in a spot that's easily found. So this is Romans 13, 1-4. It says, everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, but there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. Okay? So, now, St. Paul is writing this in the year about 50 AD. What do you remember from history class about what the government is like that he's writing about? And I'll pick on you because you're not that far removed away from general history class like the rest of us. I don't know, what do you guys think? What was the government like that Paul's writing about? It was the Roman government. Were they nice, touchy-feely? We're going to protect your rights. We're here to serve you, kind of people? They were tyrants, right? It wasn't much longer after St. Paul wrote these words that one of the Roman emperors was going to command him to have his head chopped off. So this is not a nice government. This isn't a kind government, a government of the people. And yet St. Paul is saying that even governments like that are instituted by God's power, and God is the one who instituted them. And what should Christians do or not do? We'll say it that way. You should not rebel. So Christians, according to St. Paul here, are not allowed to rebel against governments, even ones like the Roman government. So no rebelling. Now, what I mean by no rebelling is no taking up arms fighting against. We should always, always, as Christians, be using our words to speak out against the government and telling them if they're doing something that's wrong and inappropriate. We always need to use our voice to speak God's truth into the world, into our wider society. There's a lot of times there you can get into 2 extremes. One would be if you've got a bad government to take up arms and rebel against them. The other side would be to say, well, God's the one who put that government there, so we need to do everything that they say. Right? Both of those extremes are bad. We need to be somewhere in the middle where we're not rebelling. We're still living according to Jesus's moral teachings, but we're still speaking the truth out. So you can think of obvious examples of both of those. In my mind, the one that is the people that said, well, the government is put there by God, so we just have to follow along with what it says. That's what happened to the Christian church in Germany during World War II. They basically just, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them just went on with what the Nazis were doing, and basically turned a blind eye to everything that they did, and said, well, I was just following orders. I'm supposed to obey my government, like it says in the Bible, and that's an excuse. We have to obey God rather than man. So if our government is telling us to do something that is sinful, we have a duty, a Christian duty, to reject what the government's telling us to do, and then continue to speak out against it, suffer the consequences for that. Okay? So what that looks like is when we do that, we invite suffering into our lives. So there were a group of German Christians and Swiss Christians that were speaking out very loudly against the Nazi regime. And a lot of them were either run out of the country or they were arrested themselves, that sort of thing. One of my favorites, although he's not a pure example, is a name by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if you know that name. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a phenomenal Lutheran preacher and teacher that spoke out very strongly against Hitler and everything that he was doing. I think, though, he took it eventually too far. He was involved, we don't know exactly to what extent, he was involved in an failed assassination attempt against Hitler. He was arrested, thrown in a prison camp in Poland, and was executed 2 days before the Russians liberated the camp. So, but if you ever get a chance to read or learn anything about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, strongly encourage you. He's a wonderful Christian thinker about what it's like to follow Jesus in a very meaningful, powerful way in a world that assumes that everything's Christian, and a lot of times it's not. So the other one would be, so we can't obviously just take up arms and straight up rebel against the government for things that they're doing. An obvious example of that, obviously, would be our country, right? Our country, why did we reject the rulers of the British government? You guys remember? It actually wasn't heavy taxes. We actually had less taxes on us than the people in Great Britain did at the time. The people in England had more taxes than the Americans did. It was because there was taxation with no representation. We didn't have any representation in the government, and so that's ultimately why we rebelled. It's because of that issue. Now, huh? I don't think so. Like, there were some parts that were like, it was a little bit different back in that day. There were, like, Maryland was the Baptist colony, and there was the Puritan colony, and Massachusetts, right? So it was divided up, but there was not, you didn't have to become, by the time the Revolutionary War came about, there was already Lutherans and Baptists, Catholics, and what we call Episcopalians, Church of English there, Presbyterians, all those sorts of Christians in America. So according to St. Paul, though, when we look at St. Paul's words from Romans 13, were our founding fathers right to do that? Would St. Paul agree with them? No. Right? I think we just kind of got to admit that. Now, should we say then that America's a bad thing? Of course not. Right? America's fantastic. I love this country. It's a great place. And it's got a lot of wonderful things going for it. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we can say that America, by and large, is a very good thing, and I think has been a force for good as a whole for the world. That being said, so how do we think about this? Is that This is the way that our God works, and this is a good thought experiment to look back in your own life as well and see how all these things work together. That God will always use the things that weren't right, the things that were bad, the things that we did wrong, to make wonderful things and make wonderful things come out of them. Right? So say it this way: we break eggs all the time, and then God makes an omelet. You can look at your life and say, oh man, when I was younger, I did a lot of bad things, but where I'm at now, I can see how God was leading me through that and led to some wonderful things. A great example I have in my own family is my mother's first husband died in a car accident when she was pregnant with her third child. So she had a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, and she was pregnant with her third. Her husband died in a car accident, right? Very bad thing, right? We can say that's horrible, 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 horrible. But then she married my dad a couple of years later and had a wonderful thing, right? 2 wonderful things, me and my brother. So we can say that good things can come out of bad things. So just because we can disagree and say what the revolutionary leaders did, our founding fathers did, wasn't in line with Scripture, we can still say that the things that came out of that can still be good and wonderful to a certain degree. So yeah, we can still be, we still love our country and love the principles of America, even though recognizing that. So we can't rebel, and we have to obey God rather than men. This means that we do suffer the consequences for it. The scriptures are all about this, that when we suffer unjustly, that's a good thing. So how do we approach suffering as Christians is that it's not something that we run away from. Especially when we are suffering for doing the right thing, we don't fight back. Instead, we accept it and receive it in the same way that Jesus did. So in the same way that Jesus allowed himself to be nailed to the cross, tortured and beaten, so we ourselves allow ourselves to suffer, and that's a powerful, powerful witness to our strength of faith and to the power of the gospel. You look back at our history, look at the ways in which the church has grown by leaps and bounds. It was specifically because of how Christians suffered peaceably during times of incredible persecution by the Roman government that St. Paul is writing about. I think a good modern example of this is Martin Luther King Jr. I think he's a good example that civic disobedience, of how to stand up for principles that are right, and yet at the same time suffer the consequences without fighting back. Because it turns out God's work and the kingdom of God doesn't come about through violence, through engaging in violence and perpetuating that. It comes a lot of times in through receiving violence ourselves. Okay? But we still need to respect, honor. Paul says all the time, pray for them. So we'll add pray. So we're going to pray for our family, pray for our government. So we do that a lot in worship, right? We pray for our president, we pray for our governor by name all the time, regardless of what party they're in, right? So that's one of the, because of where I'm at as a minister in the area, I almost enjoy it when a Democrat's in the Oval Office, because I get to pray for him by name, and it causes people that are really strong Republicans to get kind of heartburn over it. And it's no, we need to pray for him. God, this is when the Christian rubber meets the road, because St. Paul tells us to pray for all of these people. Peter tells us to pray for the emperor. In the Roman government, as it were, and so pray for all of our leaders, regardless of who they are, whether they're good or bad. We don't pray for them to succeed in what they want to do, but we pray that they would do the things that God had established them for. And what God had established them for, if you want to look at, again, maybe this is making a little too much of it. It could be. I'm willing to have that debate. So what are governments for? Let's see. He says here, for he is God's servant to do you good. For if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Okay, so what is the government for? To bring punishment on the wrongdoer. And then here, I don't know, let's see. Okay, yep, that's not in there. So the government exists to do good for those who are good, like that's its purpose, and to punish wrongdoers. Now, the government doesn't always do a good job at that, right? In the same way, we don't respect and honor our parents because they always do everything right. We respect and honor them just because they hold that authority. Okay? Any questions about how we relate to the government? Okay. There's a whole lot more I could talk about that. I have a lot of fun talking about that intersection between politics and faith, but may not be the time for it. And then there are church fathers. So this is specifically talking about pastors, is what this is. So honor your father and mother. Pastors would also be included in those other authorities as well. So again, I don't know if you guys know this, pastors are kind of goobers a lot of the time. We're kind of odd ducks. I remember like looking around one time as I was getting ready to graduate from seminary. I turned around and just looked at all the people that were gathered in chapel, and I'm like, gosh, there's no hope. What a bunch of nerds we are. But yet it's through us that God decides to do his work. So to administer the sacraments and announce forgiveness. So that being said, there's some honor that is simply there just as a part of it. And I kind of touched on that in the sermon a little bit today, where I talked about how the pastor does have, and this is especially true in the LCMS, there's a very high view of the pastoral office. There's a lot of respect given to it simply because he's a pastor. And we definitely see that in line with the fourth commandment. But just because the pastor says it doesn't mean it goes, right? So the pastor is not the boss, the guy who says, "Oh, this is not the pastor's church; it is Jesus's church," and the pastor always does well to remember that. But yeah, what does that look like? Again, is basically pray for your pastor all the time. I need prayers constantly, all the time. Yeah. So. Yeah, with the explanation, we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, right? So basically what this looks like, at least with the government and our parents when we're younger, we don't despise or anger them by disobedience. So, you know, we can talk about this about all sorts of laws that we hate. So what's a law that you hate? I hate Iowa's speed limit on its interstate, right? I think it's a dumb law. It's not nearly fast enough, right? It's so horrible going on I-80 from Nebraska, then hit Iowa and like, ooh, slow down, right? According to the fourth commandment, what do I have to do? You got to obey it, right? What happens if I don't? I'm going to get a speeding ticket, right? So then I got to talk to my wife. Oh, I was speeding. Yes, I know we don't have money to pay for a speeding ticket right now, right? But all that stuff is just, again, like, if you want to, this is what St. Paul is talking about, in the same way with your parents. Especially when you're younger, like, if you want to have a better life, you just don't break the rules, right? If you break the rules, if you're going to act like the government can't tell you what to do, the government is going to tell you what to do, right? You fought the law, but the law won, right? And it's just simply the way that it is.
So are you saying that, like, the COVID vaccine mandate or whatever they laid out, if we didn't take it or whatever, abide by that you're breaking that commandment?
Great question. No, it wasn't a law, right? It was a strong encouragement, but again, we kind of have to reason through that for various reasons. We need to, there's not necessarily a simple yes or no. So that is such an interesting point of history because there's so many different things that connect there. So I got the first jab, but I never got the second one. So just to kind of let you guys know where I'm at. Now that I know more, I don't think I would have gotten the first one.
So as a federal employee, we didn't have a choice. It was our job or else.
Yeah, and I think that's I know Christians who resisted it on moral grounds because this is their. I don't know that much about vaccines to know this is true, but there's something about how the production of vaccines has to do with aborted babies and fetuses. I don't know that much about that, so I can't speak intelligently. But I know a lot of Christians were making that argument why it was against their conscience to do that, so they would obey God rather than men. With the vaccine, yeah, we are Americans, right? For better or for worse. And it turns out if you, there's no quicker way to get an American to do something than tell them they can't, right? Or to get them not to do something to tell them they have to, right? So we kind of have that rebellious streak in us. I would say, you are free to do it or not. Get the vaccine as a Christian. It doesn't come to a matter of breaking the fourth commandment because it wasn't a specific law, right? Because there was no law that said you have to get a vaccine, right? But even then, it may not be a sin, right?
I just was curious. When you said
Yeah.
obey the government, then I was like, well, there's an example of.
Right. So we can't, when we apply these commandments to ourselves, we can't, like, detach our thinking. So, do you mind sharing more about your thoughts on it, Scott?
I didn't want to take the vaccine.
Okay.
I pushed it right up to the last day, thinking that they'd back out of it eventually. The feeling when your government makes you do something is not a good feeling.
Right.
It just goes against everything I think we have in this country.
Right. No, I think you're right. I'm more of a libertarian by political bent myself, so as soon as the government says you have to do something, I'm like, okay, no. Like, I'll do it for common order and decency. Like, I'll follow the speed limit most of the time. But, like, if you're making me do, like, stuff like that, I'm like, not gonna.
But you could also look at that and say that was from an employer standpoint. So like the government happened to be his employer.
Right.
So that, I think that made it even worse.
For sure.
Because you could have had employers couldn't make you.
Well, but they could fire you.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, how many pilots did that happen to?
Mm-hmm.
I remember that was the big thing. A lot of pilots got let go because they wouldn't take the shot. Yeah.
So how would that fit in doing harm to your body? Like, that's another sin.
Right. So when it comes to what is our ultimate goal, what is our purpose, this is how I really apply all of these things to ourselves. God put us here. We all know what our purpose is in life, which is to love our neighbor. These laws, these 10 commandments, as well as all of God's laws, are there to enable us to do that to the best of our ability. So why can we say it's a sin to get drunk? It's because it's hard to love your neighbor when you're drunk or hungover, right? Why do we have a Christian responsibility to be healthy, physically active, and fit? I learned this when I weighed like 330 pounds. My kids were really young. It was really hard to bend over and tie my shoes and run after my kids when I was that heavy. So I'm like, I can't love my kids and serve them like I would want to, being this overweight. So, like a lot of those things, we kind of have to weigh out, like, is this going to enable me to love my neighbor better or not? And here's the thing, this is a really cool thing. We might not always come to the same answer, and that's okay. We need to learn how to respect each other in that and recognize that we're all working towards the same angle, which is what's the best way for me to love my neighbor.
So I disagree. I think a little drinking helps me love my neighbors.
I didn't say a little drinking. I said getting drunk.
Well,
it depends how much you want to love your neighbor. But yeah, right? So, I mean, that's, yeah. And I don't know if I feel qualified enough to give that answer from a lectern or pulpit to say this is the teaching of the church. Say we have a responsibility to love our neighbor and to protect them, even in times of pandemic. But I will say that the way in which we went about it as a nation was the most backwards way that we possibly could have done it. Like to quarantine the healthy is just dumb. It didn't work. And I think we can say that just off of the data that it didn't work. It was such a unique virus, there's no way to tell what it was going to do. Like, I ministered to a 93-year-old woman that a stiff breeze could have knocked her down. She came through it just fine. I ministered to a 45-year-old and he died after 3 weeks in the hospital. So there's no telling what that virus was going to do. I mean, it was such a crapshoot. It's such a one-time unique deal that I'm almost hesitant to make too much of like, this is what we should have done. In hindsight, what I would have done is I would have never, ever, ever closed the church, which is what we did. We went all online down Lockwood, and I would have said, if you don't feel comfortable coming, don't come. But we're going to be open for worship. And it turns out I read this book while during COVID, during the quarantine, because I had a lot of time to read. It's a book called The Patient Ferment. And it talks about why the Christian church was so insanely successful in its first couple of centuries. And it's because they acted so differently than the world around them. So in the Roman era, in the Roman Empire, plagues were a pretty common thing. And what would happen when a plague would come, someone in your family would get sick, and say you were a normal Roman citizen, Roman person living in the Roman Empire, you would take your sick person in your family and you chuck them out the door. And you just go lay them in the street because you don't want to get it. Right? And so what the Christians would do is they would go out and they would grab these sick people, and they would also grab orphans and like disabled people that nobody wanted to take care of, and they'd bring them into their homes and they'd nurse them and they'd raise these orphans and they'd take care of these sick people and these widows. And it was so bizarre to everyone around them that it like people were like, well, this is something really different. And then as I was thinking of applying that to my own life, I'm like, oh no, we did the exact opposite. Instead of like going to the sick people to minister to them, we're like, oh, you got the COVID, stay away from me. And I don't say that to make anyone feel guilty. I'm just like, we had a chance to look really different, and we really botched it. With the best of intentions, but yeah. So I don't know. There are a lot of people still convinced that the vaccine was the right thing. I'm not convinced that it was. I heard of a lot of people have really weird. I got really sick off of it when I got the first shot, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that again. It took me out for like 3 days, and I've never had COVID. I've tested for it because of my job. I tested for it a lot, and I never once tested positive.
Is COVID still?
Oh, of course it is.
Why don't you do it? People dying.
Because what happens with all these diseases is that eventually when it dilutes being passed around and mutated, it mutates in a way that it doesn't kill the host, right? Because these viruses, they're not, it's not in their best genetic interest to kill their host, right? They want to live off of their host and spread to the next thing. So what happens with these viruses, they continue to mutate on and on, they get less and less powerful. So COVID is still definitely a thing, but it's basically just another variety of the flu or a really, really nasty cold. So and the thing is, there's COVID is just basically, if I know right, it's basically just a respiratory virus. It just happened to be one that was designed for gain of function research in a laboratory and got out, and that's why it acted so weird, is because it was, and I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat for a second. I do believe it was a specifically humanly modified virus. I do believe that. Okay, now I'll take my tinfoil hat off. Call me crazy if you want, that's fine. I'm not into too many conspiracy theories, so that's one I'm totally on board with. And birds. Birds are lies. They're not real. The government's just listening on you. Okay. Great question. I didn't answer that question at all. That was a good conversation though. So we see how we can apply these kind of things to us. And it's not black and white. It never is. We'd like it to be, but often isn't. So obey the speed limit. Don't flip off police officers. Pray for Donald Trump and Jim Pellin, and you'll be okay. Right? Okay. So just real quick on that, just one more issue when we're talking about families, abusive parents. That's an entirely different animal that needs to be handled aside from this. I would say this kind of applies to the sixth commandment too in our thoughts of divorce. You got to do what you can to protect yourself from evil people. So remove yourself from them. Abuse is very, very, very damaging. So especially this is like, I know a lot of people who had very abusive parents, and when they grow up, they stumble against this commandment a lot. They're like, I'm supposed to honor my father and mother, but I don't want to be anywhere near them. It's like, that's probably okay. Just continue to pray for them, and you can call that good enough. Because your life is better without them in it, and their life is better without you in it. Because we would believe not only is it a sin, not only is it not good for the abused to be in that situation relationship, it's also not good for the abuser. Because sin is not good for us. It's not good for us to commit sin. So when we're abusing someone else, it's actually not good for us either. So everyone's kind of better. Like, I hate to say it that way, but abusive people that are abusers probably just need to be alone. And it does need to be handled on a case-by-case basis, though. So I'm not going to make any sort of blanket statements beyond I'll say this. If that's something that you are dealing with or have dealt with, let's talk. And let's figure out if it's something you feel torment and troubled in your conscience. Let's talk about that so we can get you some peace. Because that's what I'm all about. Okay? All right. Fifth commandment. From one fun topic to another fun topic. Okay. Fifth commandment, you shall not murder. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. So this is all about how we use our bodies and that sort of thing. And so this is one of those areas where we definitely need to take Jesus's teachings in line and filter the Ten Commandments through Jesus's teaching. And how does Jesus want us to think about the use of violence? Because the fifth commandment says, you shall not murder. And it'd be really easy to think, well, as long as I haven't murdered someone, kept it, right? I'm doing okay. But it's not so quite. Not so quite as that. So Jesus, as he teaches, especially in the Sermon on the Mount, he's moving us to think about what kind of people does he want us to be? Okay. So there's two portions here. So hopefully you're able to read that a little bit. If not, I'll just read it. You guys can follow along. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. And anyone who says to his brother, Raka, and that means idiot or moron, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the hell of fire. Okay? So what he's talking about there is this idea that as long as I'm not murdering someone, I can pretty much do anything. I'm okay. Jesus even here is forbidding anger to a certain extent. Okay? So emotions are wonderful gifts from God. Okay? There are 4 basic human emotions, and it rhymes. They're sad, glad, mad, and this one's a bit of a stretch, egad. Egad stands for fear, right? Mad, sad, glad, egad. Emotions are a great gift from God because they're like the Well, when you're driving your car, can you see what's in your hood, what's going on under your hood? Why not? Because it's covered, right? What do you need to tell you what's going on under the hood? The gauges on your dashboard, right? Your emotions are the gauges on your dashboard to yourself. Your emotions tell you what's going on under the hood, as it were. So we want to recognize that those emotions are okay. Those emotions are good gifts from God. They tell us wonderful things. But at the same time, we can't allow them to run the show. Okay? And this can very happen easily with anger. What Jesus is talking about, he wants us to think that, he doesn't want us to think that, it's okay as long as you don't murder someone, but it's okay to be filled with anger towards people. Okay? That's not the kind of people he wants us to be. People that call people idiots. Anger is a lot of time is a function of what happens when you are in pain or you have lost control of your life. So if you don't and the most perfect example of this is toddlers, right? What happens when you tell a toddler that they can't have that cookie for supper? What happens to sweet little Julia? She throws a, right? Right? Full on temper tantrum, meltdown. Now, you ever seen an adult do that? At a store or something? Right? I said, no cream. You put cream in my coffee. Or when we're in pain, right? Someone steps on your toe. You usually get mad. So when that kind of stuff happens, you got to figure out how to handle it, figure out how to deal with it in a reasonable way. Anger is a very powerful emotion because it tells you when something's out of order. So you got to get it dealt with quickly. So because anger can so quickly turn to other things, where we end up disparaging other people, speaking down to them, and even physically harming them. So although anger is not bad, we don't want to hold on to anger. So when it comes to anger, deal with it quick. This is why St. Paul says, when he says, be angry, but do not sin. And then he says immediately after that, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Meaning that if you feel angry, you need to figure out immediately why it is that you're angry and what you need to do to get yourself straight. When you're ticked off, you're like, why am I ticked off? Oh, I know why. Usually for me, it's because my kids aren't doing what I'm saying, right? Because I'm not in control at that moment. Because I like this illusion that people listen to me. And my kids are very good at poking holes in that illusion. So how do I deal with it? Well, I don't scream at them. I go be by myself. Take some deep breaths. Listen to some music. Calms me down. There's all sorts of different strategies for dealing with anger. And we can talk more about that at a later date if you are so interested. But yeah. Okay. So the next one that has to deal with that is an eye for an eye. Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. Okay? So eye for eye, tooth for tooth is this is a good law that's from the Old Testament, and basically every culture has it, is a limiting revenge principle that says that you can only revenge yourself against someone to the limit that they hurt you. So it's not Scott hits me and I murder his whole family, right? So the eye for eye, tooth for tooth thing is he hits me, I get hit him back. Okay? Jesus says, no, that's not the way that it's going to be in the kingdom of God. It's a different kind of thing that's going on here. And what does Jesus say? Someone strikes you, what do? On one cheek, you turn to them the other also. So, and then he says, don't resist the evil person. So turn the other cheek. Do not resist the evil person. Um, this teaching of Jesus causes a lot of people just a lot of struggle. And this is one of the harder teachings, I think, of Jesus that he teaches that we have when we try to actually apply it to our lives. So this comes in. I remember this comes in largely in the matters of this question of, are there times when violence is justified? Um, and this usually is the good guy with the gun narrative, or in matters of home defense, self-defense, those sort of things. I remember a couple years ago, there was a gentleman coked out of his mind. Not coke, meth. He was methed out of his mind. Robbed the grocery store in town. Went to a store, or went to the next the house right next to the store. Broke in, asked the people or not asked, told the people to give him the keys so he could get away in a car, and the homeowner shot him and killed him. And I remember being in the DMV the next day, and there was another guy talking about that, and from the sounds of it, it sounded like he couldn't wait and was wishing that someone would break into his house so he could shoot them. I'm like, whoa, something's really wrong here. Like that kind of attitude, that kind of view. And as I talked to more people and thought about it, like there is a very strong sense of the goodness of self-defense. I've posed a challenge to most of my classes, pretty much every class that I've taught, and I've yet been answered. This doesn't mean that I can't be. I'm always willing to have this discussion. Here's the thing, I'm continuing to process these kind of complex issues. I've never once landed and say I'm never going to move except for Jesus' resurrection, right? And that's definitely the issue with self-defense. I've kind of radically shifted my views throughout the years. And the challenge is, find me one passage in the New Testament, either from Jesus or the apostles, that says that we have a right to self-defense. That says it's good to use violence to defend ourselves. I've read the New Testament multiple times. I can't find it anywhere. So again, the issue is not what am I allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do. The issue is, what kind of people does Jesus want us to be? Jesus wants us to be people of peace that do not turn towards violence as a way to accomplish what we want done. And I don't think it's actually helpful to think so much in terms of when can I hurt someone and when I can't. I think it's probably better to say I'm always going to be a person of peace, so that I think honestly in those high stress situations, you never know what you're going to do until those moments come to you. But at those specific moments, we have my hope is that my spiritual training that I've done to be a person at peace, to be a person who does not see violence as the answer in any way, stretch, or form, that my training will take over. And I'll live and die in a God-pleasing way. But so again, like it's those questions of, I know that this is coming up, it's in all your brains right now. What if? What if? What if? And I'll just keep coming back to, what kind of people does Jesus want you to be? What does Jesus say? It's not about what I say, it's what does Jesus say? And I think as long as, like, I have a very specific reading of it that I think I take Jesus very seriously when he says don't resist the evil person, he actually means it. In a very broad application. And to definitely understand that we are not to revenge ourselves on other people to any stretch. Or use violence to protect ourselves.
Pastor, what is war fit into that then?
It's a great question. It actually fits under the fourth commandment. I was going to bring that up, and I was almost sad that our officer of the peace wasn't here today. So I would love to have this conversation with her. We understand that God rules the world through two different, sometimes call them kingdoms, we can call them realms. We have the left-hand realm and the right-hand realm. The left-hand realm, God rules the government, keeps order and peace through the government. God has instituted and given the sword, as we looked at the sword, which is physical force, given that to the government to use to punish wrongdoers and to bless those who do well. Okay, so when a person is acting on behalf of the government as a soldier or as a police officer and has to use force, we allow for that. But at the same time, we kind of recognize that as, and I'm not saying that police officers or soldiers are evil, but the act of using violence is a necessary evil, which what I mean is that it's a very destructive thing, both for obviously the person who's being violenced upon and for the person who's inflicting the pain. Like this is why PTSD is a thing. Soldiers, like it does something to human beings to kill other human beings. Like it does something to us. It ruins us. It is not good for us. Those people, they can live very productive, happy lives, but it takes some work to get that stuff sorted through. So what I would go with it is, it's certainly not God's ideal. It's not what God wants, where any human being is going to have to kill another human being. In any situation, that's not going to be good. Now, can we say that the opposite what might be worse? Yeah, it could be, right? So this is how Luther understands, and I think it's a helpful analogy, understands war. He says it's kind of like a surgeon who has to amputate a gangrenous limb. Sometimes you got to chop the limb off so that the whole body can survive, and that's it. That being, sometimes you got to chop off a country so that the entire bit of human civilization can survive.
Why can't that be said for a home invasion when your family's at risk?
Right? And that's the thing, like, where I'm still kind of processing it. And I'm saying, like, we as Lutherans have that understanding that we have this division between the two. And we would say that within your, this is where what we have is this thing called the doctrine of vocations, is when you're acting as in the vocation of police officer or soldier, you can do that, but that doesn't always apply because you don't have that vocation those other ways. What I go back to is, like, I don't know if I have a great solid answer that sorts out that discrepancy. I recognize it's a discrepancy in my thinking, and that's why I said I'm still processing through it. But when you get to this is the thing that comes back to me. Like, if someone is persecuting you, is threatening you for your faith, are you supposed to fight back? No. In that moment, someone breaks into your house, are you going to stop and ask yourself, are they killing me because of my faith? Because I'm a Christian? Or are they doing it just because they see an easy target? I mean, no one looks at you and sees an easy target, Scott, but so that's the thing, like, as soon as you start adding, it gets complicated as you start adding different ways that we can not follow it to the letter, it gets complicated really quick.
Well, God asks us to protect the innocent,
Mm-hmm.
your wife, your kids, when
But how?
armed robber comes in, well,
Yeah, like I know I'm totally sympathetic, and like I said, even to this day, I don't know what I was if someone broke into our house, I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I would actually be peaceful or not. I really don't. I think probably some of my I don't know. What I can say is that taking of human life is never a good thing, right? But yet God can still make good things come out of that. It's just when we get to Jesus's teaching again, what does he say? And the thing is, like, we're supposed to defend the innocent. You're saying with force of arms. I'm saying prove it. And I'm saying I'm not saying I disagree with you that I don't think it's there. I'm just show me. Like that's an honest plea. Show me where it says that in the New Testament, right? And that's where I want to come back to over and over again is what does the Bible say? Because usually when I teach this, they're like, Pastor, you think that someone breaks in is attacking my wife that I shouldn't. It's like I'm not saying anything. It's what does Jesus say? If Jesus is Lord, if He's in charge, if He calls the shot, tells us how to live, what is His teaching on this stuff?
Jesus gives just a lot of
So
He doesn't always give us the answer.
yeah,
We have to
so
come up with our own answers in a lot of cases.
I'll say this: if you, God forbid, are put in that situation where you end up taking someone's life to save Wendy, is that going to damn you? No. Is it going to be a good thing? No. Right? So I think on that, just on that point, you and I can agree to that far that we can say, yeah, there's certain part of it that it's a sin, not because you did something wrong, but just because it's horrible. It's an evil that we are in this situation where we're having to deal with this kind of situation, right? So maybe to say it as mildly as I can, all sins are forgivable, but the sins that we commit, the actions that we do, are not always in line with God's will for us, and we can feel those things in our lives and how they affect us afterwards. And I'd suggest that there's a reason why the reason why Jesus commands us to be people of peace, whatever the cost, because He knows it's not good for us to take the lives of other human beings, especially. Do you have something you want to add to that? Wendy? No, Wendy looked like she was gonna
Well, I was gonna do a little bit of a subject change.
go for it.
Okay. How about the death benefit?
Yeah,
Somebody who has money.
yeah. So that again, that fits under the government is doing that. So the government is doing that through the hands of the executioner and so forth. Yeah, and the death penalty, is it allowable according to Christian theology? Yeah, the government has that right to do it. Again, I think that kind of depends on the individual Christian, whether they could do it. Like, I couldn't be an executioner. Like, I could do that. I get sad when I have to drown a mouse that's stuck on a sticky tack pad. So that's just the way that God made me.
So if the government says it's okay to murder for somebody that has murdered,
Yeah.
then the death penalty, or if the government says abortion is okay.
Right? We got to obey God rather than man. And it's that specifically that passage in Romans 13 where St. Paul says God has given the sword to the government for a reason. And that's on page, I think, 33 in your catechism. 34 in your catechism. Right? So we'll go back to that. Yeah, he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. So God uses the government to punish wrongdoers. I think we see that in executions. Right? And that's a whole nother fun, wacky debate that can be had on what is the role of our punitive justice system. Is it to punish wrongdoers or is it to rehabilitate them? America is trying to do both at the same time, and it's obvious that the mixing of the two doesn't work as well, right? Because if you're just there to punish them, you're not going to give them college courses, right? But if you're trying to rehabilitate them, why would we execute them? So, which is it? I don't think we've made up our mind as a society what we want to do. I don't know if I shared. Did I share this with you guys last week? With I don't remember who I talked to. C.S. Lewis, 1940s, 50s, Great Britain author. They didn't believe in the rehabilitation justice system, or it was just coming in when he was writing. And so, like in that day and age, if you were guilty of murder, they'd probably execute you in a couple of days. Like you weren't waiting around for a long time. And I know there are some places in America that are really bringing that back. Like Florida just passed a law that if you are a sex offender, I believe, and there's a certain number of credible witnesses, you get fast tracked to the death chamber. And yeah, so we're obviously not trying to rehabilitate those people, at least not in Florida. I don't know, which is right. Well, that's the thing, it gets complicated. Jesus actually isn't terribly concerned about what the government does. He's concerned with what you do.
But at the
Right.
same time, like America, we are the ones voted what the government does.
Right?
So
It gets so complicated when it's a democracy. It's way easier with a monarchy, isn't it?
okay.
Yeah, because we take a little bit of responsibility for it.
Because that is their decision.
Right? Right? And this the thing is, in the same way that we don't take responsibility for the actions of our parents, we don't take responsibility for the actions of our government. That's we put them in power because that's what our system is, to do certain things. They're going to do good and bad things. I think that
As an individual, if I voted for that person that is doing things that shouldn't, that is partially my fault.
probably. So confess it, receive forgiveness, and move on with your life.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's good to be a third-party voter like me, because I just throw my vote away every single election. I know it actually has no effect on anything. So that's how I've kind of gotten around it. But no, that's a different issue. Like I just am so cynical of the main parties. Politically, I'm pretty well black-pilled at this point. But did I answer your question, Wendy? Yes. Okay. All right. We'll talk real quick about one. There's some. So we want to be people at peace, as I tell my kids routinely. Hands are for helping, not for hurting. That's what the fifth commandment is all about. So we use our hands, we use our bodies to help people, to lift them up. So that's what we should try to do with the fifth commandment. We take care of our neighbor's body and needs in every way we can. So if they're sick, we take care of them, that sort of thing. So this is why, in the great Christian heritage of our civilization, hospitals and orphanages only really came about through Christianity, right? I mean, that's how all that got started, was people trying to fulfill this specific thing. Caring for the poor, caring for the sick, caring for orphans and widows, the most vulnerable. I think that's the best way to defend the innocent, as it were, is to be active and proactive and a force for good. But there are a couple of issues, societal issues, that we are going to talk about. One of, and we won't hit them all today. We'll talk about. Let's see, we got abortion, suicide, and kind of related to both of those, euthanasia. Okay, so which one of those three you want to tackle first? Kind of warm, fuzzy conversation here at the end of class. I'll let you take your pick. Which one you guys want to tackle first? Euthanasia. Okay. So as a kid, I always thought when my parents would talk about, teachers would talk about, they talk about the euthanasia. I'd always think what was wrong with those little kids in China. I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot, right? That's not a. So euthanasia is a Greek word. The EU. This is it's how you say good, and then thanasia is the word for death. So euthanasia literally means good death. So euthanasia is the practice that when a person's life is no longer worth living, it's encouraged of them to end it. Okay. So what are the characteristics for euthanasia? For a lot of people, it is largely pain-free. We would say it's dignified, and it is, what do we say the third one is? Self-directed. Okay. So a lot of times you can, sorry, that's off the screen a little bit. You can maybe find some variations in some of those, but that's basically how the discussion goes. People will say their lives are basically worth living as long as they're pain-free, as long as they're dignified, meaning basically that they're in control of themselves. They're not, you know, incontinent, that kind of thing. And they're able to look presentable, and they're self-directed, meaning they can do the things that they want to do. If those things, and this isn't, the only thing, people would say if those things aren't there, then it's encouraged that you can take your life, right? You can find a doctor to prescribe you medications that will end your life. It is essentially suicide. This is becoming a wider and wider topic in our day and age. Canada is going absolutely insane with euthanasia. There was a woman not too long ago that had some back pain, and the doctor suggested that she euthanize herself. It's like, what is going on in Canada? They're wacky. So they're really nice, but they might kill your grandma, so watch out. Um, so what is the Christian's problem with euthanasia? Because to a certain point, especially as a libertarian, I'm like, if a person's going to end their life, let them end their life. What's the matter? What matters is what it says about life. It says that life, human life, only has value if it meets certain characteristics. That is a very, very dangerous thing to believe. Life, we'll had human life. We won't talk necessarily about animal life. That's a different topic. Animal life's valuable too, but human life's a different level. Human life is valuable because it is what? Not hard. Human life. This is the truth we've got to cling to in all things, that human life is valuable simply because it's human life, regardless. And regardless of what characteristics aren't met, like if you have a lot of chronic pain, if you're not dignified, if you're not able to do the things you want to do, say you're stuck in a bed or something like that, your life still has value, absolute value. And the reason why this is so important is because our history is already filled with examples of what happens when we think that this way, when we start thinking that life is only valuable if it meets these certain characteristics. Because it's one thing, it's actually a surprisingly small step. And it's a small step to say, my life is only valuable if I meet these characteristics, to go to your life is only valuable if you meet these certain characteristics. There was this whole movement at the beginning of the 1900s called the eugenics movement. The whole thing was basically through selective breeding among humans, we were going to create better humans. And so we were going to kind of get rid of all the riffraff, and we were going to have a much better society through better breeding. This led to all sorts of horrible practices in the United States. In the Appalachians, they would chemically, not surgically, chemically castrate the mentally disabled and criminals. So they weren't able to have children. This wasn't by their choice, by the way. This was done to them by our government. That was part of a larger movement within the world, and that eventually went to its fullest and most scary view and expression in the Nazis. So the Nazis, you guys know what Nazi stands for? It's National Workers Socialist Party. So the idea of the Nazis was every person, their value of their life was built on what value they brought to the nation. So if you weren't bringing value and success and goodness to the nation, you were no good. And so everyone else, for the good of the nation, needed to be done away with. So the Nazis did not start with the Jews. They started with the aged, with the handicapped, and both physically and mentally. They would crowd them in a room, and they would back a van up to it and just chug exhaust into that until they would all die of carbon monoxide poisoning. Because they said these people's lives were not worth anything. They weren't valuable anymore because they didn't add anything to society, so we just need to get rid of them. They're drained. And if you ever want to read a book that will leave you crying, it's called Happy Valley of Love. And it's about a disabled home in Germany in the years before World War II. And it's all about this young man who's living in this and how the other people are trying to fight off the authorities because the authorities keep wanting to grab up all these handicapped people and kill them. And at a certain point, my brother and I were listening to it on the road to Colorado to go to our aunt's funeral. And there were a lot of times when we were both yelling at each other, like, I'm not crying, you're crying. Like it's a really good book. It's a really good book. Beautiful testament to Christian character and the value of life, regardless of what that life looks like. And then, right, so once those people were handicapped, or once the handicapped people were gone, the aged were gone, the people were a drain on society, that's when they moved on to the Jews. Because the Jews, they weren't helping the nation either. They were the great enemies of the nation. They were just keeping the money all to their Jew selves and whatever. So using that same nationalistic view, they went after the Jews after that. But they also killed Catholics and they killed Gypsies too because they were a blight on society and they didn't add to the nation. So I don't always say this, but why is euthanasia wrong? Because Nazis. That's why euthanasia is wrong. And this is still practiced. This kind of thing is still practiced today in a terrifying way. And it's kind of connected to abortion as well. Greenland Iceland will boast that they have completely cured Down syndrome. They've completely cured Down syndrome by aborting all babies with Down syndrome. Right? That's like saying I cured cancer by killing all the cancer patients. And their rationale for doing it is because that child's life will be too hard. It'll be too difficult, and it won't be a good life. And I think that is abhorrent. Because I tell you what, if I could have half of the joy of the children that I know with Down syndrome, I think they're living a pretty good life. And who am I to stand in judgment and say that my life is more valuable than theirs? Because I have a higher IQ than theirs and I have a longer life expectancy than theirs. That's just, so we always have got to push back against that and say that life is valuable because it's life, regardless of what it looks like. And I do believe that God puts us in different situations in our lives where sometimes we are the ones who are giving love and service and other times we need to be the recipients. So there are a lot of people that I've ministered to that were doers, givers, servers, lovers, not lovers, people who loved others all throughout their lives, caretakers. And then the second they get old and frail, they get depressed because they're not good for anything anymore. And I say to them, how unfair is that? That you get to hog all the good works to yourself. Let someone else love and serve you for a chance. Don't rob your neighbors, your family, of the opportunity to put their faith in practice. And then they go, okay, Pastor. So.
I think I already know where you stand on this, but I could be wrong. Someone that's hospitalized and the family has to decide whether or not to pull the plug or not, because machines, they can't keep them.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. We make a distinction between ordinary intervention and extraordinary intervention. So ordinary intervention would be non-autonomous things. Extraordinary would be the autonomous things. So it's wrong to pull a feeding tube if you've already inserted one. You don't have to put one in, right? But if you've already put one in, and you're feeding the person through the feeding tube, it's wrong to take it out, right? So good example would be Little Weston. Never mind, I'm not going to bring that up because I am recording. Yeah, so do you remember Terry Shiloh? A couple years ago. You don't remember? There was a woman, she was brain dead, was in a car accident. Her husband pulled her off of her feeding tube. She could breathe on her own, but basically he starved her to death then. But like, if it's like a respirator, we can, that's okay to turn that off. That's a very difficult thing, right? I will say it's okay. Doesn't make it easy. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it wonderful. But that being said, and this will touch more on like the third article of the creed, the way that we face the end of our lives, and the discussions we have about the end of our lives before that point, I think can change a lot of things. It says a lot about our faith. I do think that we should have those questions in our own minds already answered. Is basically answer two questions you should have for yourself all the time, and you should ask your loved ones to have those answers too, because this helps out you to figure out questions and answers to questions about medical treatments. What? And I know it sounds a little bit contradictory to this, but what makes, for you as an individual, what makes life worth it? Like, what do you need to do, and what are you willing to go through there to get it? So if you have to have a surgery to get rid of a cancer on your spine or something like that, but it's going to paralyze you. The question is, do you go through that surgery? So we're talking about beforehand. Do you go through that surgery? You got to answer like, am I going to think that life is actually okay and good without the use of my legs? I would say yes to that. I think I would be okay. You are a very different man than I am. Like, you're a manly man. Like, you do things, build stuff. We're not going to all have different. We're going to have different answers to those questions. That's okay. But that's a whole different topic on how we face dying. This isn't about the value of life, but to recognize that we are mortal, and the way in which we face our mortality actually does kind of matter. But that's not necessarily a euthanasia thing. That's kind of how do we face the end of our lives. So. Any other questions about euthanasia? All right. Go pet a kitten. Hug a puppy. Do something fun and joyful today after this rousing, wonderful topic. Thank you all for being here. And we will see you next week at 9 o'clock.